for the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, that we penetrate the cabinets.
I also want to reiterate how deeply sorry Canada is for the situation this put President Zelensky and the Ukrainian delegation in. It is extremely troubling to think that this egregious error is being politicized by Russia and its supporters to provide false propaganda about what Ukraine is fighting for.
Why does this government treat Alberta like a fart in the room that nobody wants to talk about or acknowledge?
I heard her say a word that I know is distinctly unparliamentary, and I think she may want to withdraw it. The word was F-A-R-T.
I mean, we love your Mr. Trudeau. I mean, his family's always been such big fans about that.
Hello, everybody. I am, of course, your host, Snow Himbo. Welcome to the Maple Files. Hope everyone's having a great Monday so far. So let's get the elephant right out of the room. We are less than a day away from the presidential election, where America will decide who the next mascot for the capitalist class will be. If you're just tuning in, this has been my long-standing opinion for a long time. I know people are some people might be a little nervous, like on the down low. I feel like as Canadians we're a little nervous just because like we kind of have to trade with the US, and you know, like the tariffs thing is probably gonna suck, especially because Donald Trump doesn't fucking know what a tariff is. But the Kamala thing is gonna suck too. And both of these candidates are extremely supportive of an ongoing genocide that is happening over in the Middle East against the Palestinians. If you want my predictions, I can't tell you. To me, it's kind of a toss-up. On one end, you've got, you've got Kamala Harris, who is really not, let's be real, not really offering a lot. I mean, shit. What she got? Like a tax break for small businesses. She's pretty nebulous on healthcare. They run the whole like abortion thing every single time. And then you got Donnie Baby Hands, who's like, I'm going to give you no tax on tips and no concept of a healthcare. Like, these can't be the decisions. I'm sorry. This is just fucking atrocious. But I maintain one way or another, nothing's going to fundamentally change. If these parties ever did make a difference or hurt the bottom line of the rich and powerful, they wouldn't be allowed to exist. And I say that because, whenever a third party like Dr. Jill Stein tries to get any kind of significant leverage, she's either sabotaged by her own party, or, the major parties actively try and get her disqualified from participating in democracy. That's not even covering my perspective when it comes to first past the post voting, because I don't think that's democratic either. I don't think you should be voting while holding your nose, and I don't think you should have a system where you have to strategically vote at all when it comes to like lesser evil voting or whatever. You should be able to realistically choose a good candidate and have something like ranked choice voting, so that you've got a backup in case your prize horse shits the bed. Some people will probably vote for Jill Stein and then put like Trump or Kamala second, for example. And that's the only way I'd see like an actual democracy happening. but I don't think America lives in a democracy. I don't really think Canada does either. But I digress. We got one hell of a show tonight. Hopefully it'll be fairly brief. I had some ongoing stomach issues earlier in the day, so I'm going to try and get some good sleep tonight. If only because I got a ton of work this week. But we're going to have some fun. Now, to start off right off the bat, I did not know Real Life Turning into Spaceballs the movie was on my bingo card. But apparently it is, because yeah. Cans of fresh air from Lake Como on sale to tourists in Italy. Which I know, it's every bit as insane as it sounds. So let's dive in. For tourists returning from vacation, a camera roll of photos and a suitcase bursting with souvenirs are usually the closest they can come to bringing a piece of their holiday destination home with them. But now, communications company Italy Comunica says it has bottled the very air of Italy's picturesque Lake Como and is selling these cans for $9.90, which is about $15 for canned air. Each can is said to contain 400 milliliters of 100% authentic air collected from Lake Como, a destination that has become increasingly popular with tourists in recent years, thanks to its beauty and its celebrity associations. George and Amal Clooney own a house nearby, while movies including Casino Royale and House of Gucci were filmed there. More than 5.6 million people visited Lake Como in 2023, and the numbers are consistently growing, according to Lombardy Tourism Bureau. In an attempt to capitalize on the visitor numbers, marketing specialist David Abagnale, hope I pronounced that all right, originally created an e-commerce site selling Lake Como posters after seeing so many posters of San Francisco and Los Angeles on his honeymoon in 2022. His latest initiative, selling canned air, aims to create a souvenir that could be easily transported in a suitcase for tourists, and something original, fun, and even provocative, a spokesperson for Italy Comunica told CNN on Monday. It's not a product. It's a tangible memory that you can carry in your heart, Abagnale told CNN, adding that once tourists are home and have opened the can, they can repurpose it as a souvenir pen holder. Oh, cool. This must be the efficiency of capitalism. Not everyone is on board with this. Como Mayor Alessandro Rapinez said it wouldn't be his first idea for tourists and would prefer they take home other souvenirs like the silk scarves the area is known for. It's a novel idea, but not for everyone, he told CNN. But as mayor of one of Italy's most beautiful cities, if someone wants to take some of their air home, that's fine as long as they also take beautiful memories of this area. When reached by phone, Chiara Piscatelli, who sells the canned air in her bookstore in Como, said it was a real gadget. Despite the apparent novelty, Como isn't the first Italian tourist spot to offer a can of its finest air. Abagnale says the idea came from other locations like Naples, where the local air has been sold for years. And in 2020, one company began selling bottles of authentic air from England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, okay, better, to provide UK residents overseas with the scent of home. Tourists can also buy cans of air in Iceland, while a Canadian company saw its sales boom in 2015 when hundreds of Chinese customers began buying its canned air. I mean, goddamn. I feel like when you're selling air for like $15 a can, we're pretty down bad, huh? Like, I can't really imagine something scammier than selling air. Because really, you're just selling a can. Because one way or another, you got air. But you're just getting air. This would be better if it were a situation like Spaceballs, where the actual air is the scarcity. And you got the little can of Perrier, which we all remember. But as it is, yeah, I don't know. But that's how it's going. I don't know. You guys tell me. Would you buy air? Because I probably wouldn't buy air. I'm a little privileged because I live in a fairly cottagey sort of area, so the air is actually really nice. That's actually the first thing I noticed when I moved out of the city. I noticed the air was just. I noticed the air itself was pretty incredible. You know, it just smelled really good. It felt fresher. But when I lived in Toronto, like, that's one of the most, you know, that's the biggest city in Toronto. So the air quality isn't great, as you can imagine, for most large cities, really. So. Max RJ, we're going to turn ourselves into a shithole country. I feel like the West in general is headed for that pretty rapidly. I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters quite much. Happy Monday. Happy Monday to you, CBC voter. I don't think it matters quite much who's at the helm. I think the West is on a decline. I think it's been on a decline for a while, and I don't have very high hopes for the future, unless there is a radical change that occurs and we go on a significant course correction, one which will almost certainly hurt a bunch of rich people's bottom lines. That's the only way forward in a positive direction, in my opinion. And I feel like those very rich people, due to the influence they have over our governments, will ensure that doesn't happen. So anything short of like a massive general strike or a revolution, I think we're kind of just headed in the same direction regardless. You need look no further than the states and what both parties are promoting. You know, Donald Trump, he LARPs like he cares a lot about the immigration problem. But when you see the people he's affiliated with, it starts becoming pretty clear that, you know, restrictions and heavy-handed authoritarian measures are what's on the table as a solution for that immigration. And, you know, not for nothing, but the Democrats are they're accepting the right-wing framing on the immigration issue, and they're likely going to offer the same. As conditions worsen and worsen, you can expect the state to start the big clampdown. Speaking of which, though, well, sort of. Not a great segue. Like, probably about a 6 out of 10 on the segue scale. Activists warn Canada's IHRA antisemitism handbook silences Israel criticism and Palestinian voices. Canada has released a new educational handbook on anti-Semitism that critics say will lead to the stifling of Palestinian experiences and activism. To the surprise of absolutely nobody. At least it should be to the surprise of nobody. The government of Canada, the government of Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau published a new handbook on anti-Semitism on Thursday that Palestinian rights activists say could stifle criticism of Israel and lead to the persecution of pro-Palestine activists. The Canadian Handbook on the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism is described by the government as an educational resource as part of its commitment to combating anti-Semitism. However, Canadians for Justice and Peace in the Middle East, CJPME, claims that the handbook will have a chilling effect on pro-Palestine speech and activism. Much of the controversy stems from the involvement of the IHRA, which stands for the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, and whose definition of anti-Semitism is widely seen, surprise, surprise, as conflating criticism of Israel with anti-Semitic rhetoric. One of the most contentious elements of the handbook, based on the IHRA. Hey, Nahilo. How's it going, man? Based on the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism is the idea that criticizing Israel as a racist ethno-state is anti-Semitic. To which, if you come across these hucksters who are trying to promote this kind of propaganda, I have the perfect example. You just go, hey, so by that logic, if you criticize Justin Trudeau, because a lot of the pro-Israel people are critics of Justin Trudeau, by that logic, if you criticize Justin Trudeau's government, does that make you anti-Canadian? And if they say no, then you say, okay, well then how does criticism of Israel and its government make one anti-Semitic? It doesn't make sense. The CJPME says this will result in public institutions persecuting people who criticize systemic racism within Israel rather than fighting discrimination. The handbook also claims that it is anti-Semitic to oppose the ideology of Zionism, which is defined only as support for Jewish self-determination in their ancestral homeland. Critics say this ignores the historic and contemporary role of Zionism in the dispossession and oppression of Palestinians, such as the Nakba, Israel's current illegal occupation of the West Bank, and the war in Gaza. Case studies cited in the handbook include social media posts stating that you can't be anti-racist and Zionist, and Zionism is a racist and violent settler colonial project. On this basis, they warn that this will be used to silence Palestinian experiences of Israeli oppression and the freedom of speech to criticize Israel. Other examples of alleged anti-Semitism cited in the handbook include the rescinding invitation of a speaker from an event because she had served in the Israeli military, as well as social media posts calling Israel colonialist. After over a year of Canadians protesting Israel's genocide in Gaza, Trudeau has the audacity to publish a guide on how to crack down on pro-Palestine speech. Michael Bucher, Vice President of the CJPME, said in a statement. This anti-Palestine, pro-censorship handbook poses a direct threat to civil liberties and will target the critics of Israel's atrocities, especially Palestinians. We urge Canadian institutions to reject the use of the handbook, he added. The CJPME claims that over 11,000 Canadians have emailed Prime Minister Justin Trudeau calling for him to scrap the handbook, which, goddamn, that's a good chunk of people who are like, this is dog shit, we don't want this, please take it away. Trudeau has come under fire for what many consider to be his biased policies towards Israel, such as his initial refusal to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. The Canadian government also adopted a partial arms embargo to Israel, which critics have pointed out will still see the sale of offensive weapons that will be used against civilians in Gaza. Trudeau also handpicked Deborah Lyons, Canada's special envoy on preserving Holocaust remembrance and combating anti-Semitism, and a former ambassador to Israel to lead the drafting of the handbook. So that's where the fuck we're at, people. it's to all those Americans who are tuning in, we're in the same quandary up here. We're still dealing with the same unbelievably dishonest framing when it comes to anything to do with Israel. Such as the ridiculous notion that the simple act of being like, hey, I don't think you should be blowing up children is somehow anti-Semitic. It's like Caitlin Johnstone said, right? Like there's a consequence. I'm paraphrasing. There is a consequence to people seeing just endless children and women and babies getting slaughtered, and then all of these people showing up and saying, if you don't say this is okay, then you're anti-Semitic, and they're waving Stars of David around and saying this is Jewish, this is Judaism, this is blah blah. Like, what? I always argue, like, what do you think that's doing? That's not helping anti-Semitism. That's doing the opposite. So, on top of that, we've got a tweet that kind of breaks this down a little materially, this problem we have going on here. All right. This is from KC321Go. Just announced. Ontario taxpayers, you're on the hook for $551,000 that's being given to CIJA, Friends of Simon Wiesenthal, and Liberation 75 to educate your children. Ontario expanding Holocaust learning resources at school. Province investing in more supports to combat rising anti-Semitism in communities. So we're paying for this. We are paying tax dollars and as you can see, a lot of people are correctly pointing out the problem here. This is essentially brainwashing. Like Canada, I know we all claim that this couldn't have come to our country, but it's here. This is pretty fucking scary, because and all the conservatives who are like, they're indoctrinating your kids. What the fuck do you call this, guys? Okay, all the anti-woke crowd who's like, they're indoctrinating your kids. Yeah, not a peep on shit like this. Not a peep. It's crickets. Because for some weird reason, you can't join the right-winger club unless you're like unbelievably hypocritical when it comes to Israel. And you have to support everything they do unconditionally, which is by design, in my personal opinion. To those who tuned in, I think a couple episodes ago, but we went over a rather disturbing video of Pierre Poilievre essentially prostrating himself before an Israeli conference, which shows you his allegiances pretty perfectly. The entire conservative machine here in Canada was also in full-blown meltdown mode when Toronto had that pro-Palestine protest. Mostly because the numbers were staggering, but I mean they were all enraged, just losing their fucking minds. So we're here. We're stuck with the same problem. But I digress. I do want to come to the main reason why, the main reason for this program this week, which is essentially the elephant in the room being the American election and how that's going to affect Canada. I do have a video to play that does, kind of touch on certain elements, but I have my own thoughts as well. First and foremost, I feel like one factor that I don't see enough discussion on is how whatever government we're going to have in a year's time, around there, how that one is, hi Kitty, how that one's going to gel with whatever candidate gets into office. Historically, Trump wasn't great for Canada. His weird thing with tariffs and basically just sabotaging trade in general when it came to other countries was belied a unbelievably daft understanding of economics. But that being said, I don't think Harris is going to be much better. Either way, I'm almost certain that we're seeing the end days of Justin Trudeau. I don't know how Pierre Poilievre would gel with a Harris administration. That seems like it might be a little adversarial. I'm going to be honest, though. I don't think Donald Trump would respect Pierre at all. I think he would kind of look down on him. I think they would align, obviously, with the whole being mouth foaming reactionaries thing they got going for them. But I don't know. As we know here in Canada, conservatives, the biggest wish Canadian conservatives have is they want Canada to just basically become America. I think if they had the option, they would just have Canada just join America. We'd cut the borderline and we'd just be Greater America or something. I think that's what most conservatives would. That's their wet dream. On the plus side, I mean, what I'd find really curious is how an NDP government would deal with Donald Trump. Because just at least jug me, his style versus Trump's style would be interesting to navigate. For Max, they are saying that Trump might be better for the stock market and the crypto space, super bad for tariffs. It's gonna make us pay almost 100% more. Yeah, Trump wasn't good for Canada the first time around, guys. People can delude themselves into thinking he was somehow good for Americans, but as far as our country, he wasn't great. Tariffs are really stupid. And the thing is, here's the thing. A lot of people don't realize, good for the stock market does not mean good for the working class. It doesn't even mean good for the middle class. What it usually means is good for moneyed interests. And as for crypto, I maintain the position that there is some sort of scary Orwellian digital currency at the end of that tunnel. My spidey senses, my red flag went off the second that shit started becoming popular. Not to say it doesn't have its uses. I'm not shitting on it wholesale. I'm not making any blanket statements, but I would be very surprised if at some point the rich and powerful did not leverage that as a control mechanism against us dirty proles. so to speak. That being said, we're going to play a video here from CBC News, the National. Just about how the election result could impact Canada, and then I'm going to give my take on it. Take this bad boy from the screen.
Just across the border, our neighbors are about to make a decision that will affect all of us.
The relationship between the United States and Canada is a very personal one.
I would not build a wall on the Canadian border. I love Canada.
Harris or Trump? Predictable challenges or chaos?
Canada has treated us very badly.
Canada was taking advantage of us, as usual.
Your cash is on the line.
There'd be a lot of short-run disruptions because businesses would need to find new suppliers, new customers, and almost surely a recession.
I wanted to find out what Canada can expect if Kamala Harris is in charge or if Donald Trump gets reelected. So I reached out across the border to two people who analyze this stuff every day. Terry Givens is a political science professor. She recently joined the faculty at the University of British Columbia. And Eric Miller is a Washington, D.C. based consultant. He advised Canadian governments and corporations on trade. Here are three things to expect under each possible presidency.
Starting with a return to Trump.
I'm going to put a 100, 200, 2,000% tariff.
The first big challenge, tariffs. Donald Trump has promised to impose at least a 10% tariff on all goods.
Who called it? Who called it? Like this is his go-to.
Imported to the U.S.
There's been no sense that current free trade agreement partners will be exempted.
That means everything Canada exports to the U.S. would be more expensive, and Americans would buy less.
And with a huge adjustment cost. For Canada, whose prosperity depends on exporting, the introduction of significant new tariffs from the United States would cause a great deal of pain.
Economists at TD Bank crunched the numbers. Here's their baseline expectation for GDP in Canada over the next couple of years, growth around 2%. Now, watch it drop when you factor in Trump's proposed tariffs.
Other countries will be encouraged to retaliate. So what it likely means is that many things that Canadians are buying from abroad, not only from the United States, will get a lot more expensive. So the cost of living and inflation challenges will be made much, much worse.
Challenge number 2 under Trump, migration.
On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history to get the criminals out.
Donald Trump is promising to deport 11 million undocumented people from the United States.
What kind of pressure would there be on the Canadian system if that deportation actually is implemented?
Oh, I think they'll be huge.
Givens says Canada could expect more people trying to come here, both legally and illegally.
There's going to be people who want to leave the U.S. and go to Canada. And if that influx increases dramatically, I think it's going to be important for Canada to start thinking proactively about ways to work with other countries. How are we going to manage this flow?
The third challenge under a second Trump presidency, defense spending. NATO countries are supposed to spend 2% of GDP on military and defense. Right now, Canada spends about 1.29%. There's a plan to get to 2% by 2032, but don't expect that timeline to satisfy Trump.
Canada is not seen as pulling its weight, and it will become really fundamental that Canada does come to be seen as pulling its weight if it is to build this kind of positive relationship with the Trump administration that it would like to see.
So what about Harris? If she wins, the change won't be any.
Go to Harris in a sec. I'm just going to address the comments. If Kamala wins, you know it's been hacked. Almost everybody hates her. I sure fucking do. So here's the way I look at elections under a capitalist system. I don't think the campaigns are fake. What I think the exercise essentially is it is an audition to be the face, the mascot of the bourgeoisie, of the ruling class. So they're essentially looking at candidates and going, who do we want to be the face for all the stupid bullshit we're going to do to meet our prime aims and fuck over everybody else? And I say that because of capitalism's inherent contradictions. There's always a fucking over that has to occur. It's just which side are you giving or receiving the fucking? That's the only difference. I don't think there's like hacking. I know a lot of people talk about Dominion voting machines, blah, blah, blah. I think all those are red herrings. I think these people are just selected. I think the rich and powerful, just essentially it comes down to like, yeah, you know what? I want Kamala to be the face of the empire. She seems a little less coarse, and things are about to get really fucking bad for people. Or we need a guy with a strong hand. We're probably going to be entering World War III soon. You know what? Trump's our guy. I think that's the extent to which there's a democracy, really. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong. I don't actually know. But that's what makes the most sense to me, at least. Angel. Trump wouldn't be able to introduce new tariffs because the Senate would block it. Very little passes the Senate, and that's by design. Yeah, that's completely correct. And that's also why I argue that we don't actually live in a democracy. Trump and Harris both get up here, and I mean, this time around it was pathetic how little they promised, or how little they have plans for virtually anything. But at the end of the day, like, you have to ask yourself, because I hear this a lot, where it's like, oh, well, this person's saying they're going to do this, but you know it's never going to happen. And it's like, okay, that's a really great argument to just not trust any politician fucking like ever on any promise they ever make. Because here's the thing. When these politicians are saying I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, like they're not completely unaware of issues that it might face in the House or the Senate or up here in Canada, Parliament. They're aware. But they say like, nope, definitely going to do that. As opposed to like, I'm going to try and do a bunch of these things and hopefully I can get the Senate to work with me. I can get the House to work with me. I can get these people to work with me. But I can't make a promise, obviously, because it might get blocked. That said, Angel, I hope you're right, comrade. I hope tariffs are blocked, because they are single-handedly the stupidest economic idea. Like, I'll put it this way. I am 95% convinced Donald Trump does not know what a tariff is. I don't think he knows what they do. I think in his mind, it is some magical, like, other country pays, like, America. I think that's what goes on in his brain. I don't think he has any grasp of, like, how this concept works. I don't think he knows that, for example, the cost is actually passed on to business owners, who then will almost certainly, unless they're like completely incompetent in terms of business acumen, they will then pass that down to the consumer. Essentially, whenever you see a politician screaming about tariffs, what that's going to translate to you is shit is going to be more expensive. Also, I'm sorry, but when we're talking production, like, America has no ground to stand on when it comes to tariffs, period. What do they produce? How are you going to place a tariff on all this shit when you don't produce anything locally? You're just going to make people poor, and they're going to get mad at you. Anyway. Let's hear the argument for Harris, now that we've been subjected to the orange man bad.
Anywhere near as dramatic, but there will still be challenges.
Right off the bat, Canadians can expect trade disputes with the Harris administration. Get ready for a familiar fight over milk and cheese. The Americans want access to Canada's dairy market.
One can count on the fact that dairy will be a top demand for the United States toward Canada.
Also, a Harris administration would push back hard against Canada's digital services tax aimed at U.S. tech companies. The second challenge under Harris, that pressure on defense spending won't go away.
You know, I think that a Harris government is still going to say, hey, Canada, we want to see you get up to that 2% in NATO, but they'll be much more supportive of NATO.
Givens says a Harris administration will be concerned over Russia and China's influence in the Arctic and expect Canada to pay up.
This is just going to be a very hot issue for Canada going forward.
And if Harris wins, there could be an impact on Canadian politics. A Harris victory could send a message to federal Liberals about what can happen when you change leaders at the last minute.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I think there are already a lot of emboldened Liberals who are speaking up, but I think a Harris win would show that it can be done.
We have an opportunity in this election to turn the page on a decade of...
I don't think this is the argument, because of course, like they're even saying the quiet part out loud. Justin Trudeau is historically unpopular, and he's historically unpopular for a shitload of valid reasons. For me, I'll never forgive him for suckering me into voting for him to do electoral reform, and then him bitching out and essentially justifying, well, I'm in power now, so we don't need to do electoral reform. I'll never forgive him for that, but he's broken a million other promises. I think his handling of the trucker convoy in Canada was atrocious. I think it was unbelievably irresponsible. It was a clear sign that this person looks down on these people, and he is unwilling to negotiate or come to the table with the concerns of Canadians. I think, I'll put it this way, I think when there's a general strike, don't be surprised if the government treats that general strike the exact same way it treated the trucker convoy. And I argue that because look at the way they treated Palestinian protesters in campuses across the country. Okay? Once again, the mask of capital fell off. Out came the fucking jackboots. The U.S. is obsessed with making Canada spend more money on America's imperialist wars. Not just more money. You know, they want... I think this is all angling around to, hey, Canada, we need people to go die for Israel. Or go die for America fighting China. Or whichever direction World War III is going to spin in if it does happen. But I mean, of course, NATO's like their bread and butter too. So I would argue like on that front, it's pretty set in stone. But the takeaway I've got so far is like all of these challenges under Trump, most of them would probably also be challenges under Harris. To which I point out, it's virtually impossible to not then arrive at the conclusion, what the fuck is the difference between these parties then? What are you voting for? And the answer is you're voting for a mascot. All the people are like, we gotta stop fascism. Go look up Umberto Eco's list of fascist qualities. Then see how many apply to the States. You can then also see how many apply to Canada. I got newsflash for all the liberals who pretend to be scared of fascism. You're already fucking in it. It's just, there's a neoliberal veneer. It is a polite fascism. That's the reality of the current state of being. The Canadian dollar is America's favorite yo-yo. Yo, word. That tracks. It tracks.
Donald Trump.
As close as the race is, we may not know who wins the election for a while.
I think we don't have time to panic. I think we have to start laying out scenarios around what will happen and start looking at what are the carrots and what are the sticks that are needed to be deployed in order for Canada to be able to effectively navigate this period.
Both Miller and Givens say Canadians should be patient. Their advice? Plan for both possible presidents and wait.
Help! Help!
Oh, we're not doing ads on here. So that's essentially it. I like how they made sure to mention that nobody might know for a while, which to me at least signals that, you know, it might be a long ass count once again. You know, I know everybody's like super excited for the election tomorrow. It could be just a blowout one way or another. It could be a Trump landslide or a Harris landslide, and they just call it and they're like, yeah, this was a W, a firm W. But it could also be like we're waiting a while to figure out like who actually won this shit. You know, there isn't like, I'll put it this way. There aren't as many obstacles, in my opinion, as like the COVID era, because obviously they had like a shitload of mail-in ballots. The whole voting process was a little slower anyway, because we were kind of in the midst of a pandemic. But, you know, it still could take some time. I'm firmly in the camp of like, you should prepare for the worst outcome regardless. And, you know, at the end of the day, I feel like, I don't know, I feel like either way, living conditions in Canada are probably going to get worse despite that. Now, another question that I don't see a lot of people ponder as well. Will the results of the American election influence the upcoming Canadian election? And I would say the answer is yes. I think people are already drawing a lot of similarities between the Trump camp and Pierre Poilievre's camp, which is why they use the term Maple MAGA now. I think Pierre Poilievre has adopted a lot of Trump's rhetoric. He's kind of LARPing like pretty hard as like the Canada Trump guy. And you see a lot of the online like conservative party like bots and operatives like kind of parroting like MAGA talking points. So I think that could definitely influence it. I think a Harris W would probably embolden the Liberals. But it could also be a chance for the NDP to kind of, the advice I've been giving them for a while now, to step the fuck up and start offering your way forward as a viable third alternative. Even if they're completely ineffective, even if they are kind of moving to the center, which I don't fucking like at all, thinking strategically, this is a great opportunity to go, listen, we tried conservatives, didn't work. We're trying the Liberals, they're not working. Why don't we try us? Put me in, coach. I think that might be a little more viable under a Harris presidency, but you know, in the chance that Trump does get in and he does somehow get away with the psychotic tariff shit, that might present an opportunity for the NDP too, because they're essentially saying, listen, we can't, the working class needs more help than this. You know, we need to make the material conditions of Canadians better than what they are. And we're the only party that actually has a plan for that. Because, you know, at the end of the day, like the Conservatives, like axe the tax, build the home shit. that's not going to make life more affordable for you. It's like I always say, conservative policies, they are rich people policies in working class clothing. Because every policy a conservative puts forward, and this is the same in the States as well, once you read the fine print, it's clearly going to benefit a class of people that is in a different tax bracket than you are. But they're very good at selling them as pro-working class. That's been the Canadian conservative shtick for a while now. And one thing I feel like Americans have borrowed from Canada, at least in this election, maybe unintentionally, is you've got a lot of the conservatives in America who are now also kind of like LARPing as the working class party, where we care about the working class, which ridiculous. Look who they're planning on giving tax cuts to. It's not working class people. They seem to care, like the very bottom for them seems to be like small business owners, which nobody cares about. But I digress. We'll really see what happens tomorrow. I feel like a lot of people are going to make it like a big bonanza, and I feel like a lot of people are going to expect like a firm, solid like decision one way or another. And I don't know if we're going to get that. You know, it might take a while before a clear winner is decided. Berkshire Hathaway owns Burlington Northern, which transports a lot of goods to Canada and US to Canada. Mm-hmm. But like, at the end of the day, one way or another, you know, the main takeaway is that I think there's probably a reason why most of our politicians, both up in Canada and our neighbors to the south in America, don't seem to have a lot of solutions. And that's because I don't think there's a lot that can be done at this point. I don't think the West expected BRICS to pop off the way it was going to. I also think the West expected, you know, they didn't expect the death of the petrodollar. I thought that was, I thought they probably assumed that was just going to be an easy dunk. You know, I don't know if the ruling class has really firm plans here. You know, I don't know if Canadian politicians have it either. We're kind of, let's see. Angel, I wish it takes a while. That means more content for my show, Angel in the Afternoon. Yeah, be sure to check out Angel in the Afternoon if you haven't. It's a great show that I have graced with my beautiful face. I'm totally kidding. But do check out Angel. His show's dope. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be good content. If it does take a while, it's going to be good content for pretty much everybody. Right? Because you can kind of like, you can kind of engage in that fun game of like reading the tea leaves and reporting on the different little developments and, you know, figuring out which direction, you know, it might be headed. I'm guessing it'll take a couple days to sort out who won. Yeah. I think that's pretty fair. You know, if I'm right about my assumption that this shit is essentially just a selection process by the rich and powerful, you know, they might be kind of in deliberation. I mean, if I were like a billionaire, I'd be kind of torn because you got a bunch of different factors. You've got the possibility of World War III. In that instance, you want like a hard leader or whatever. So you'd probably lean towards Trump. He'd probably be a better like wartime president. But if there's not really World War III, and we're just looking at like a steady decline, and at this point, I don't think anything's going to prevent that. You might want someone who has better presentation, or presents like a softer, less harsh like face. So that might be Harris. You know. Either way, I mean, I just have to say, like, the fact that these are the choices and it's actually a close election, that should be enough for Americans to be out on the street. You should not be forced to choose between a walking question mark and an idiot. And that's what your choice is. It's whatever the fuck Kamala Harris is. And I don't think any of us knows still what the fuck that is. Or you get Trump, who, frankly, I do not think has the juice to get done what needs to get done for the future. But most importantly, whatever the case is, Israel wins, the military-industrial complex wins, the billionaire class wins, and y'all fucking lose. And by proxy, we lose up here as well. Whoever wins tomorrow, they are going to be a one-term president. Entirely possible. You know, it depends on a lot of factors. I mean, personally, I would like to see a society that kind of moves past this whole, we need like a person to like lead us forward. I'd like to see a more active society. I mean, shit, we can all just pick up our phones and we can weigh in on anything nearly instantly. Why we don't need representatives? You know, we could all like guide the country together. I think the concept of representatives made a lot more sense when you had to like go to a location on like horseback and you got a list of shit that the people you're representing want you to like get into the books. I don't think it has as much utility in 2024 when information and the dissemination of information is nearly instant. Trump could only win one more time, but I don't think they're going to let him because of the insurrection. So there's a lot of I feel like the reason why it's a toss-up, at least for me, is I have a lot of different factors when it comes to the election in general. So first you got the elephant in the room, and I feel like liberals are kind of really like downplaying this hard. Kamala Harris has not had a long time to kind of state her case to the American people. You had Biden, he shitted and farted in front of the world, and then they yoinked him. You know, they're just like, okay, this guy's done. His brain has finally become 100% cream of mushroom soup, Campbell's variety. So it's got the stupid little mushroom chunks. Not the better variety where you got the full slices. I never got that about Campbell's cream of mushroom soup, by the way. I don't know why they had the tiny little mushroom chunks. I like it a lot better when it's at least mushroom slices, because then you have like a texture. With the little chunks, you're essentially just heating up like fucking cream. You're just heating up cream and then you're like salting it. And that's like your meal? I don't want that shit. So there is the elephant of the room of like, she just hasn't had this isn't a full campaign. She hasn't been running a full campaign. It's kind of like a last minute, like, let's just throw you in there and, like throw some shit against the wall. An elephant in the room that a lot of the MAGA cultists, an elephant in the room that I feel like a lot of the MAGA cultists aren't understanding is the fact that, like, Donald Trump was already in office for 4 years. He didn't do a lot of the shit he said he was going to do. Now, people can cope, and they can go, oh, but he just had the bad people. He was misled. He's learned his lesson. He's surrounded by good people now. You can cope all you like. But people just look at a guy who ran on the anti-establishment ticket, then got into office, and then was about as establishment as it comes, despite like the corporate press pretending that he's some kind of horrible, evil threat. When you look at shit on paper, what did he do to upset the apple cart? He didn't do shit. And I firmly believe with politicians, you can only judge them based on what they've done. I've never gotten this attitude on how politicians can run for re-election and be like, I'll get it done this time. It's like, well, why didn't you get it done last time? What's different? Why didn't you get it done that time? Why are you going to get it done this time? And they never fucking talk about any of that, which is just awful. That's a blind spot with MAGA. The reality, and I say reality because this isn't opinion. This is just how you need to parse how Donald Trump is perceived. The reality that Trump can't run as the outsider, the anti-establishment guy. Okay, this is a guy who's considering Larry Fink of fucking BlackRock to be in his cabinet. This is a guy that accepted $100 million from Miriam Adelson. There's no anti-establishment going on here. The only thing the MAGA crowd has done is they have taken establishment and repackaged it as just against Democrats. And they're saying that's the anti-establishment. The point of this is if Trump does win, okay, he can frame his establishment, which, Elon Musk is in the tank for him. Various other, corporations and interests are in the tank for him. Israel's definitely in the tank for him. Fuck, Netanyahu's going to throw a party if Trump gets in. The only thing that can change there is they can repackage their brand of establishment as like the good establishment. That's the only thing that I think will honestly happen. Honest to God. That's a really good point that I've been saying for a long fucking time, man. You, like, being conservative, being reactionary, you need to understand, having that worldview, you are never going to threaten power. You are never going to threaten anybody's bottom line. Okay? The billionaire class would like nothing more than for every single country to be as far right as humanly possible. They like conservatism. It directly benefits their bottom line. Hey, kitty. What's up? Hi. What do you want? Okay. Simone came to say hi to everybody. And the thing is, like, being a liberal doesn't really affect their bottom line either. But, like, this whole PSYOP is painting the conservatives as, like, somehow anti-establishment or, like, any way against the powers that be. Like, you're getting PSYOP'd. There's no other way I can put it. We're getting PSYOP'd in Canada right now with Pierre Poilievre LARPing like he's some kind of like force standing up to Trudeau, when in reality he's voted with Trudeau over 600 times. There's nothing that different between these two major parties. The only thing they have is rhetoric, and they need to present that false like divide, which is virtually the same in the States as well, because they don't want people realizing they're dealing with a uniparty. They don't want people realizing they don't really have as democratic a society as they would like to believe. They can't have that. That's bad for them. That's fatal for them. Because the second people realize they're not actually even being represented, or they don't really have a say in how their country's run, they're going to start asking some questions like, well, why the fuck am I paying taxes then? Why am I going to work? Why am I listening to these assholes? Why am I, like... It is a dynamic that breeds revolutionary fervor. And the powers that be do not like revolutionary fervor. They like reactionary sentiment. They like people clinging to the way things are. That's why I've always had that theory that, you know, the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum, all that. I've always had that theory that that might actually be a psyop, because you were taking valid grievance with how the country is being run, and you were essentially creating a scarier world. So like the Great Reset, the whole like WEF thing they got, you know, floating on the horizon, that's objectively shittier than the shitty existence we have right now. So when it comes down to it, people are going to cling to what we have, regardless of how little it is, or how regardless of how little it is, or how I forgot the word I was going to use. But, you know, regardless of how, like, ineffective it is, people are still going to cling to that when you've got this scary new thing on the horizon that looks way shittier. But, yeah. Either way, I mean, it's funny. I see on Twitter and on YouTube, everybody's got their little maps out where they're like, here's my prediction. And, you know, this shit couldn't be like more, this shit could not be more like textbook. The Kamala people, all of their maps are like Kamala wins. Some of them, I saw Kyle Kulinski. He had like 3 scenarios or 2 scenarios or something. And even in the worst for Kamala Harris scenario, Kamala Harris still fucking won. And I'm like, bro, really? You're that hard into the blue aid? You're drinking the blue aid that hard that even in your worst case scenario, your person wins. And then you've got all the MAGA people with their little map saying like, oh, Trump wins in a landslide. He's totally gonna win. He's gonna get all the votes. She's gonna get none. So you see this on both sides of the aisle, where it's like their version of the map. All this is just like wishful thinking. They're just like, They're just essentially saying, like, this is what I want to happen. And a lot of people, especially on YouTube, are just doing that for content. People are going to tune in and be like, I'm nervous about the election. I want someone to tell me it's all going to be fine. And, you know, that's a lot more popular than some asshole like me saying, this doesn't matter. None of it matters. What's coming is going to come, regardless of what little puppet gets installed. And you should be working on things that are more substantive and more fruitful for your and your neighbor's well-being, such as direct action, such as mutual aid, such as preparing and organizing for a action such as a general strike, unionizing your workplace. There's a million different things you can do that's going to matter more than writing some bullshit on a piece of paper and praying to Santa that he's gonna fart out some goodies down the chimney. Because, like, there's no guarantee there. Just like up here in Canada. I'm gonna say the same thing next year during the election. Regardless of who wins, we're not gonna see a lot of change. You know, Pierre Poilievre is probably gonna get right to work on trying to, you know, get rid of the social safety nets, but realistically, we don't know how successful he'll be in that regard. If the Liberals get in, unless they're promising some kind of radical change, you can expect the same, like, incompetence that led us to all hate Trudeau to begin with. And if the NDP gets in, I feel like they're going to have a pretty uphill battle, because they're going to have a lot of people from both parties trying to block them passing any kind of progressive policy at all. And that's like, I mean, we've still got a year to go. Who knows how much further to the center the NDP could move till then. You know, you could blink and suddenly the NDP is just a new Liberal party, and nothing fundamentally is different. So I'll close by saying this. If you want the world to change, stop buying into electoralism, because it's there's no point. And I'll make this case. Okay, I'll make the case for Canada and also the States. Look at the quality of living your parents had. Because unless you are in the minority and you just lucked out, you probably remember your parents, I don't know, being able to support a family on one income. You might remember your parents actually being able to own a home, or at least afford rent. And if you're one of the outliers, look at the generation in general. You know, there's plenty of statistics. Conservative, liberal, we've had all sorts of changing of the guard. I've seen all sorts of changing of the guard in my lifetime. And life's just gotten progressively worse. It's gotten harder. My dollar doesn't take me as far anymore. Wages have stagnated. Over half my friends have given up on ever owning a home. Just the simple concept of owning a home. Most people in Canada, that's like a win the lottery sort of fucking situation. For a lot of people in America, it's probably the same. Half the people I know too, they're not having kids because they can't afford it. You know, that's two incomes, just not bringing in enough to raise a family. We got to this place because of liberal governance and conservative governance, and regardless of many elections that changed the composition of our political factions, we have arrived here regardless. We're going to need radical change to turn Canada around. That is the reality. We cannot keep hoping that our politicians or American politicians are going to do this for us, because they're fucking not. I'm sorry. Like the libs, if the NDP got in power, they would face the dilemma of what the fuck? Hey, kitty, stop. Like the libs, if the NDP got in power, they would face the same dilemma of how to please their base and maintain their donors at the same time. Yeah. That's what a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people in the NDP are not in your class. They are excellent at working class rhetoric. A lot of these people are landlords. They're homeowners. They're business owners. They don't sell their labor to a capitalist in order to survive. And that's just reality. If we want to change the world, if we truly want a better future for the generations to come, if we want a better future for ourselves, we're going to have to do something about it. It's not going to come through voting. It's not going to come through some political faction magically getting a change of heart and going, okay, guys, come on. You know, the working class is just too poor now. We got to do something about it. That's never going to fucking happen. They're just going to gaslight you. They're going to gaslight you for the rest of your life into feeling bad for wanting more than the bare minimum. So, anyway, that's just food for thought. Regardless of how tomorrow goes, I do want to reiterate that you shouldn't worry, because nothing's going to fundamentally change either way. And it shouldn't stop you from your goal of helping people achieve class consciousness and helping Canada achieve class solidarity. Because that's what we need. We need a country that isn't divided, that isn't fighting over stupid culture war shit. A country that isn't fighting over things that don't affect them materially. We need a country that is willing to come together and say, look, we need a country that is going to work for the majority of people, not just a handful. And that's not coming from elections. That's not coming from voting. That's coming from direct action. And that's always the place it came from historically as well. So, without further ado, I did want to touch on some changes that are coming down the pipeline. So first and foremost, I'm going to be taking part in a election day stream with Kid of Hardlands Media. I think a bunch of other INN members are going to be there too. Just kind of hanging out, talking about where the election's looking, all that. Secondly, we're going to cover this more in the next episode of Politically Homeless, but some news is that Politically Homeless will be taking a break as a show. My co-host has kind of got a bunch of stuff he's working on, so he's going to be out for a bit, some months, I think. So, how we're going to move forward is I am going to kind of take the reins, and Politically Homeless will be a break, but after the election's over, Snow Himbo streams will be Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. This is going to be a bit of a different Snow Himbo streams because it's not going to be solely gaming. I'm going to cover current events, much like I did on Politically Homeless. World events, geopolitics. We'll be having some fun, but we'll probably play some games too. Either way, that's the format I'm going to have moving forward. I am hoping it is very similar to the same energy as Politically Homeless. I'm not personally going to change very much about how I come up with material. I'm definitely hoping to have a lot of guests on as well. we've had some really cool guests, and I want to keep that tradition up. Also, I'd love to interview people, but like an actual interview. So like I've got a bunch of questions that I'm asking people. I want to get more into that. We did that with Peter Coffin, and when I feel like it was a really good conversation. It was very stimulating. I want to do that more. But mostly, and this kind of comes from the heart, I kind of want to try my hand on, kind of striking out on my own a little bit. Kind of taking the reins and see how I do, running a show and it's just me. I'm just giving my spicy takes. I'm subjecting you guys to my various ramblings, but mostly kind of like a me brand thing. And then hopefully given enough time, the cats are fighting, fuck. Hopefully given enough time, Politically Homeless might come back, might not. We'll revisit at some point in the future. But I just wanted to give everybody some updates on like the direction that you can expect. Hey, stop fighting. Fuck. Yeah, I gotta wrap it up. The cats are losing it. But I'm not gonna stop doing Maple Files. That's gonna be either 8 or 9. And Snow Himbo streams will be Thursdays at 9 as well. So thank you guys for tuning in. Thanks for joining me. And